I think I'm just setting up the mood a bit tangentially, talking about a perfect storm and whether we have the capability to ride it out well, right? So we are talking about, is it a perfect storm or is it a perfect wave? And I'll just take some moments to explain. But before that, I must really thank the Images Group for giving us this platform, giving us this opportunity to present our point of view. There is a report which is going to come your way very soon, talking about omni-channel in general, what it takes to win in that space. But what we are going to talk about here is more overarching in nature. And it is going to talk about what we are seeing in the economy, what we are seeing as some of the challenges and opportunities that we see businesses trying to grapple with, and hence this topic that you see in front of you. So let me just dive straight in, and let me just present the left and the right on the slide here. So what you see on the left-hand side are these great technologies which a lot of us are going to experience in the next couple of days. We've just heard the masterclass on AI ML, and I think these are all the set of technologies that in some form or fashion or in some kind of maturity we are trying to deploy in our businesses. Personalization across online, offline, meeting the consumer everywhere and anywhere where she is really the holy grail for a lot of retailers. NLPs are becoming super important. How do I embed into my chatbots? How do I get it into the way I do my commerce on WhatsApp? Is it possible? People are doing it. Emotion detection, a lot of people are doing that as well. How do I run through reams of my call center data and try to make sense of what the consumers are telling me? Real-time offers. At pause, when I'm walking in the store, when I'm near the store, trying to nudge me to get inside the physical space or in the online space as well. All the various kinds of commerce that we are seeing now. The social commerce, the quick commerce, the live commerce, clickable ads, you name it, right? GPT as GPT. What I mean by that is GPT becoming a general purpose technology? When I say a general purpose technology, I'm talking about things that have really changed the course of the human evolution. When we are talking about electricity, for example, when we're talking about internet, is GPT coming into that kind of a realm or not? Maybe some of you already know that Google is also following on the tracks of what Microsoft has done and embedding now its own GPT capability in Google now. It's something which is starting off in America as we speak right now, and it's going to come our way very soon. And this whole concept, which is taking a lot of these retailers, at least in the Western world, the whole concept of retail media and clean rooms. Clean rooms essentially giving you the capability that how do I leverage the data as a full retail ecosystem and not getting constrained by what I'm generating today as a business, right? So there are these bunch of technologies that you see on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side are the holy grail, right? All the things that I would love to give to my consumer consistently all the time. Being centric, agility, scalability, cost consciousness, ability to do attribution. So we are now in that kind of a situation. We have got all these fancy tech and we have got all of these great set of deliverables that we are having on the other side. The question is it a straight line fit? Like if I start deploying all of these technologies, will that necessarily guarantee me to deliver on the right-hand side? As with all things, there is no linear relationship, right? There are challenges, there are capabilities that, or the market context which we need to keep in mind. And that is why we have put this kind of a keyhole in between, that what's the key which is going to unlock the left, is left the answer for the right? So that's the question that we are trying to answer. And what we have done is that as PwC, we do a lot of these CEO surveys and consumer surveys. And what we are trying to do in the next couple of slides, or few slides, would be just to give you a perspective of what the CEOs are telling us, what the consumers are telling us, just to make more aware of the milieu in which we need to operate as a business, right? So these are the two surveys that we frequently do. And it's a global survey, and there are India cuts as well, so I'll be talking about the India cut in particular. Now this is a very interesting slide. What the CEOs are saying that how good their business models are today, right? How good is the business model for the next 10 years, and whether I will really need to rethink on my business model. And when we are trying to answer this question, whether we are talking to global CEOs or to India CEOs, roughly the ratio is around 40%. 40% of the CEOs believe that the current operating model that they have is actually going to be relevant only for maybe for the next decade or even less. What does an operating model mean? It essentially means a combination of all the capabilities that we are building as an organization, whether it's people, whether it is tech, whether it is process, whether it is products, whether it is geographies. Do we have the right answers to meet the needs of the business today, right? So again, just deploying one side of the equation, which is tech, need not deliver you the right side, which is all the benefits that we would like to give to our end consumer, right? We need to look at it as a combination of multiple areas, parts of your business which needs to come together. When you look at from the next 12 or 5 years, what are some of the important issues that you believe are going to impact your business? And pretty much we have coming out of an inflationary cycle. So inflation, this was done in the last quarter of last year, so you see inflation at the top. But we are coming out of the inflationary cycle, we are yet not out of it fully. So how do you manage costs? And given that we are a value-driven society, getting your cost equations right is going to be permanently important. There are certain long-term trends when we are talking about things like climate change, we're talking about health, cyber. All of these are long-term trends that we will need to really think about when we are talking about our business models here. Whether we are talking about in the next 12 months or we are talking about the next 5 years. There's a bit of a flip-flop happening, but pretty much all of these fundamental factors continue to stay relevant, right? So as retailers, we will need to start thinking about not just fancy tech from a consumer point of view, but what are we doing from the wider ESG point of view, for example, right? What are we doing from making our cost equations constantly relevant, whether it is an inflationary environment or not, because we are living in a society which is a value-conscious society. So these concerns are going to be relevant for times to come, and we need to build our business models which respect that. Now this is a sentiment. That's what the CEOs are telling us, that the sentiment has taken a beating from 2022 to 2023, right? Purposefully, I've just kept 60% looking almost like 83%, but obviously it's a huge drop from what we are seeing from 22 to 23. So there are so many factors that we just mentioned in the previous slides which are possibly impacting what the CEOs are thinking in terms of how good they think the prospects are, right? So it is not a feeling of pessimism that we are talking here, but being more realistic of what we need to do to make sure that we deliver on what we aspire to as a business. Now, what is it that the CEOs are trying to do in order to navigate this challenge, right? So now it's the easiest things that make the headlines in the papers today is that how many people are knocking off jobs, right? We have seen some of the biggest tech players doing it. We have seen some of the edtech players doing it in the market. But clearly, I think that's a easier answer, which most of the CEOs are saying is too good to make a difference to my business, right? So these are some of the approaches that we are talking about. And again, if you really look at it, managing costs, building alternate suppliers, making sure that we are kind of looking at where we are investing, reviewing your alternative projects or initiatives, maybe looking at hiring freezes to some extent, slowing down some of the investments, delaying some of the inorganic acquisitions that we are trying to do, and maybe even taking conscious calls of raising prices, right? So we are seeing the entire concept of how do you manage your pricing and promotions becoming very, very important. So these are some of the techniques, at least what we are coming across, and these are all very basic and very fundamental. The question that we'll have to keep in mind is how do we ensure that we continue to deliver on these fundamental basics as we continue to invest in creating complexities in our business, right? Because when you're talking about expanding a portfolio, deploying technology, expanding geographically, you're increasing complexity. But the fundamentals don't change, and I think that is the message we're getting from the CEOs. In terms of where they are going to put their money where the mouth is, very clearly the ticks that you're seeing. So there's a lot of purposeful technology which is getting deployed, whether it is in terms of automation, whether it is in terms of upskilling, or whether it is in terms of deploying the right kind of technology which makes sense for me, right? So when we talk about technology, for us, technology always follows the paradigm of that, whether it fits into my structure, whether it fits into my capability, whether it fits into my culture, and what is the end state that I'm going to drive through that. That's going to be important. And I think this is, again, it's quite relevant for us as a forum here, and thanks again to Images for bringing us all together. I think it's a great opportunity for us to all come together, and it's not a lone warrior world anymore. You need to think about how are we building our ecosystems, and that's what, again, consciously, the numbers are pretty low, but at least participating in industry consortiums or working with startups and entrepreneurs is going to become super, super important, right? Working back with your non-competing peer groups is something that clients will have to increasingly see now. So this is what the CEOs are telling in general. Quickly moving on to what we hear some of the consumers telling. Now, I know I'm just painting a bit of a pessimistic picture, but I think this is what the consumers feel today, that almost 70% of them are going to cut down on the kind of spend patterns that they have been showing us over the last years, right? So again, it boils down to managing the fundamentals of how am I driving my value to my consumers. Whether be it product, pricing, channels, all of it becomes important. Now this is an interesting one, and this kind of connects back with the previous slide, that what is the consumer going to do today? And these are some very intuitive ones, but I think it's important that as we get into the next 2 days, we keep the basics in mind, and we see that how the interconnections of the basics with the technology and with the capability in our organizations are going to play out, right? So all of these perspectives that we hear from our consumers, to shop with retailers which give us the best pricing, which give us the best service, giving us the best value, looking at subscription services possibly. I think somewhere we will need to really open up the opportunity to see that gone are the days where we are talking about each individual moment of truth. How do we look at the consumer from a long-term point of view? We have seen the kind of action which is happening in the FMCG space in terms of new players coming in, and also doubling down in the retail apparel space. We have seen the success of a lot of retailers in pushing their own brands versus working with national brands, right? So working in own brands continue to be an important paradigm as we talk about times to come. What do the consumers look for when they're going for physical stores? And again, is there anything which is surprising here, to be honest? No, right? Making sure that you've got the well-trained staff who are actually understanding the needs of the consumer, understanding who that consumer is in the first place becomes super important, right? Self-checkout is becoming important. Are we deploying the right technology to reduce friction? We are all getting used to the way Amazon has taught us one-click purchases. How do I bring it back into the physical world? And that's where you are introducing a technology with purpose, something which the clients or consumers are expecting to get when they go into the physical space. Click and collect services, booking retail appointments. Maybe this is pretty interesting for us, that how do we blend the boundaries, and that's why this whole phygital world becomes so important. It's all phygital. Maybe it's in our minds. Either we are moving as a physical retailer to online or online to physical. Those are the compartments in our minds. But for a consumer, look at ourselves, the way we shop. How do we blend it? How do we harmonize it? That becomes important. I think this gives maybe a lot of fillip to us in which the consumer, I'll just focus on the top one. Between the two surveys, and these surveys are done at a half-yearly frequency, and you see the blip which we are seeing in the online space. So the consumers are really pushing the use of online channels in times to come. So that COVID era habit is becoming a reality now. And I think the fundamental challenges of supply chain remain very, very important even now. And this is from an online perspective, that what again the consumers are saying, that are we getting the products that we are looking for? Are we getting at the prices that we are getting for? And this is, again, the basics remain. And again, we need to think about, we have this session with Ravi, and we are going to possibly hear from him that how we need to get our supply chain accent together. This is an important trend, and I think we need to really think about it in a very conscious manner. It's a frog in the boiling water syndrome, maybe. It is not coming into our face, but consumers are thinking about it. They have been consistently telling us about it. That, am I doing practices which are sustainable? Am I getting the choices which are sustainable? Am I buying with the organizations which actually wear their purpose very, very passionately? I think these are some of the questions that we need to constantly ask us. So I think what we are just basically summarizing are these three basic short-term, medium-term, long-term perspectives to make sure that we kind of move from value protection to value creation. And these are some very basics. How do we make sure that we are staying very good on costs, right? So how do we make sure that all the short-term measures we are taking on cost remain strongly embedded as a culture, as a capability, as a way of working, and hopefully, in this mad world out there, it translates into an advantage for us, into some kind of a cost leadership. May not be across the portfolio, but into an area of strength for us, into a channel of strength for us. I cannot stress on the midterm capabilities strongly enough. Supply chain, manufacturing, as much as we focus on the front end, which we love to because that gets the maximum eyeballs. Increasingly, what we are seeing is the back end of the organization actually helps us drive an effective front end. And focusing on your production, manufacturing, supply chain, all the way to your stores, and increasingly all the way to your consumer doorsteps is going to become super, super important. And last but not the least, the entire people equation, right? We are living in a world where there's always a dearth of talent, getting the right people to work for us, creating the right culture which kind of blends with us, and not trying to do everything in-house in the four walls of our organization. How do we keep ourselves agile, flexible, and porous to learn from people around us and work with them together? So these are some of the summaries and some of the thoughts that we thought I would share with you. Not to take anything away from the exciting set of sessions that we have planned out over the next couple of days. Just keeping some of these overall societal context, the organizational context, the business context in mind as we make the most of the next 2 days. So thank you for your patient hearing. Thank you.